Alright guys, welcome back to the video. So, I want to make a quick video talking about finishes. Now, this is a pretty annoying topic for most woodworkers. I think literally every single one of us has a different finishing technique we use on a lot of our projects. And there's tons of different information out there, and there's literally thousands of different finishes you can buy, whether you're going to the big box store or any woodworking store. So, these are kind of the big five that I've tried, that have actually stuck around, that I haven't ended up throwing out. They're kind of different stages of my woodworking trial and error process. Everything from the first finish I ever tried, which was wipe on poly, all the way down to what I use now most of the time, which is tried and true varnish oil. So the big thing about all the ones that I have here is that these are all oil-based finishes. I personally can't stand water-based finishes. I just think they are a waste on most woods. And so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be trying all 5 of these products on walnut. So before we get talking about finishes, let's talk about the different types of finishes. So there's 2 main types of finishes. Well, there's a whole bunch of different categories, but there's kind of 2 main ideas. Within the oil-based category of finishes, there's film finishes, which are these 4 right here, and then there is just pure oil-based, which is the one on the end here. This one's a little bit of different, but it's basically just an oil finish. So film finishes, all that means is that they generally have some kind of oil in them that soaks into the wood, but most of the protection for the wood comes from a film being formed on top of the wood. So with polyurethane, it's a polyurethane coating going over the wood. With lacquer, it's not polyurethane, it's whatever, it's hard lacquer. I don't know all the technical terms of this stuff, but it's basically just a very thin layer of plastic getting formed over the top of the wood to protect it. So in some cases that's a really good thing, in others it's not so good. So let's just break down our finishes here. The first off is polyurethane. Now this is probably the most common finish you'll see on YouTube and in the DIY community because it's cheap, available, and it's just all around fairly easy to use. You can buy this at pretty much Canadian Tire, Home Depot, Lowe's, any of your big box stores carry polyurethane. Again, cheap, easy to use. And so the application technique for this is going to be gonna brush it, or since this is wipe on poly, I'm just gonna wipe it on with a rag, and then once that's cured, you sand it very slightly with, I like to use steel wool, but you can also use a high grit sandpaper, 1000 grit sandpaper, that works really well, and then you're gonna apply another coat after that. The most important thing with any film finish, so these 4 right here, is that you don't let dust and that settle on the finish as it's curing. So that's one benefit to lacquer, is that it dries quickly, whereas polyurethane actually takes 8 to 12 hours between coats to actually cure up properly. So next in line is the Varathane Professional Finish. I don't know what this is. It's not, polyurethane is polyurethane, lacquer is lacquer. I've got no idea what this is, but it says that it's an oil-based finish. So I bought it, this is all in order of when I bought them and try to figure out how to use them. So this one is, again, it's available at Home Depot. And I have actually done a couple projects in it. The first 2 projects I put on my YouTube channel, the ash side table and the maple side table that I made, both of those were finished with this, and they still look really good. The finish is actually held up fairly well. It doesn't look like it's not all covered in scratches and that, so it's kind of impressive. So this one again is a film finish. It's oil-based. Other than that, I don't know anything about it. Lacquer is the next one. This was suggested by Jonathan Katz-Moses. He says he uses this on pretty much all his projects. I know he uses a very different technique. He uses either your spray cans with lacquer in them or HVLP. This is brush-on lacquer, so I'm going to be brushing it on just because I don't have a whole HVLP setup, and I really don't feel like investing money in it because I don't use lacquer that often. But the few times I have used lacquer, it looks pretty decent, but I have some mixed feelings about it. But again, we're going to talk about that at the end of the video. Next up is Osmo. Now, what I like about Osmo is that you can buy little sample cans, and it's still stupidly expensive. Like this little can costs about as much as this big can of lacquer, so it's nice that they make sample cans. But Osmo is a fairly expensive high-end, it's up there with Rubio Monaco. It's a very high-end finish that is supposed to be fairly good. Now, the reason I haven't really gotten into using it is because of its price, but the couple times I have tried it, it is a fairly nice finish. The final one, and by far my favorite, is Tried and True Varnish Oil. Now, the whole Tried and True line, I absolutely love their finishes. I've tried the original, which is an actual beeswax and linseed oil finish, and I've tried their Danish oil, which is just a polymerized linseed oil, but it's not the nasty stuff you get at the big box store. But this has been my favorite. So what this is it's polymerized linseed oil mixed with a a pine resin. So this works the exact same as all the film finishes, just with more natural, less toxic ingredients. So all this does is the linseed oil soaks in and hardens within the grains of the wood, and then the pine resin, which is the varnish part of it, actually sits on top and creates a pseudo film layer, but the film layer is a little bit more embedded in the wood compared to these other ones here. So that's all of them. We're going to be talking about pros and cons and my likes and dislikes near the end of the video once I actually have all the finishes applied to the wood. But for now, we are going to actually apply the finish to the wood. So before we start applying finish, let's talk about safety. Since all of these are oil-based finishes, and oil-based finishes, every single one of them, doesn't matter the make, the whatever, they all release heat as they cure. That's kind of how oil works. You want to make sure you're being safe with your rags, your leftovers, and all that. So that means properly cleaning your brushes, maybe letting rags dry and cure on a concrete floor before putting them into a flame-proof bucket. It's very simple, but it's just one of those things that you do have to be aware of, as most oil finishes are highly flammable. Now, I know some of these cans don't say flammable on them, but it's different. It depends on their makeup and all that, but they all will release heat as they dry, and all can spontaneously combust. So that's just one thing. Along with the safety side, if you're doing any of these three finishes, you need to be wearing a respirator because they do have fairly harsh chemicals in there that can cause a lot of serious problems. And so with Paul Inks and Tried and True, I don't need a respirator because there are no harmful chemicals. There's zero VOC. Tried and True smells lovely, by the way. And you can apply Tried and True with your bare hands. Paul Inks oil has a few more chemicals in it, so you need to make sure you're wearing gloves and you're not getting the oil on your hands. But again, these three on this end, so your polyurethane, whatever the heck this varathane finish is, and lacquer, you need to be wearing gloves, you need to be wearing respirator, and you need to follow proper safety precautions when you're applying these three, because you don't want to get it on your skin because it will rash up and it can cause infection. So all that stuff, safety out of the way, let's get to applying some of these finishes. Alright guys, so it's been a couple days, all the finishes have cured up. I've got them all upside down here, so you can't actually see the results until I show you, which is going to be kind of interesting, because we got some interesting stuff. And so, I'm not going to say that I learned anything really in this. This is all tests I've done before, and the reason all these finishes are sitting here is because I've tried them all before to see what works best and what doesn't. So the first thing is the wipe-on poly that I said we were going to be using at the beginning of the video. Didn't actually end up using it because this can is actually solid. Apparently it's been sitting around here long enough, and I don't think the tie sealed the top well enough, so that was just absolutely hard. So I went to some brush-on polyurethane that I had sitting around. This stuff actually is a little bit better than this. I prefer the brush-on stuff. I didn't know I had it, otherwise I would have taken it out in the first place. So just to run through it again, we've got polyurethane, varathane oil, lacquer, Paul Inks oil, and then Tried and True varnish oil. So that's all the oils that we've got, and again, this stuff's all oil-based finishes. We're not dealing with water-based. So our first one here is polyurethane. Now, polyurethane, I have to say, is not that bad. As far as the cheapest option for finishes, for the cheapest protective option of finishes, it's not that bad. It gives decent enough color to the wood and puts a fairly good flat coated finish on it. Now, polyurethane, again, like I've said already, is probably my favorite of these four finishes, just because it's cheap, it's durable, it's just kind of an overall very functional finish. You'll see in the B-roll that it does add a decent amount of sheen, and this is clear satin, so it should be fairly matte, but not matte. So this I would classify as a satin finish. Again, there's not a whole lot wrong with it, in my opinion. One thing I will say is this does feel like plastic. I did do the sanding and all that after each coat, and overall, it doesn't really feel like wood anymore. It feels like plastic. So that's one of the main reasons I'm not a fan of polyurethane. But again, if you want that hardcore protective coating on top of the wood, then polyurethane is a pretty decent choice for you. Next up is the varathane oil. Now this is again very similar to polyurethane. It's kind of in between polyurethane and lacquer from what I found here. It does add much heavier sheen. So this is supposed to be matte, and this is definitely not a matte finish. So I followed the instructions on all of these finishes according to what's on the cans. So I don't quite know what they're doing over there at Varathane, but this is definitely not matte. So you can even see it in the camera there. Look how shiny that is. Again, this is way worse than polyurethane for that plasticky finish feel. It's just horrible. It looks and feels like plastic. So if you're wanting to take nice natural hardwoods like walnut and then coat it in plastic, this is a pretty good option. As far as durability and protectiveness go, I do actually have a couple projects finished with this stuff, and the durability is actually fairly good. So again, if you go back in my videos, the ash side table I built that has the top of it is stained. This stuff works really well over stain, and that's one of the main reasons I actually keep this can around, and one of the only reasons I really use it anymore is because it is one of the only finishes here that I've found actually works well over stain. So as just kind of a general finish, it's not great, but as something to put over a stained wood, it's actually not bad, because the stain seems to dull out this crazy sheen that it gets. Next up, this is exactly what I was hoping for, but I was also not hoping for. So again, this is one of the reasons I refuse to use lacquer on any of my projects. And I mean, I don't want to insult Jonathan Katz-Moses, because he's like, I love the guy, I love his projects, I love all his videos on YouTube, but I don't know how he can use lacquer on all of his projects, because this is always what happens anytime I've tried to use lacquer. I don't know what it is. I applied it following the instructions on the can. You know, you brush it on, let it cure, brush on another coat. You don't do any sanding in between, because it's a self-leveling, self-wetting finish. I don't know why this happens. The can is really well mixed up. I made sure, again, I mixed up all the cans of finish as well as I possibly could before putting them on, because I really wanted this to work. But I've managed to get this every single time. So the first coat of lacquer, I forgot to take pictures of it, but the first coat of lacquer really just added a very super dull, gross looking finish to the wood. You can kind of see it on the non-ruined areas here. But the second coat was what really just made this go crazy. And again, you can see there's lines, there's all these weird spots of, I don't know why this happened. But again, this is one of the reasons why I won't use lacquer on any of my actual projects, because every time I've done test pieces, it always turns out like this. So I am glad that I bought it, because it's a decent, it was a decent thing to know about and test. But yeah, I won't ever use lacquer on any of my projects, because I don't know why it happens, but it seems like it consistently does. So Pauling soil is definitely in a hard third place for me, just under polyurethane. As far as ease of application goes, it's pretty much the same as oil, or just pretty much the same as a traditional oil. But overall, it doesn't give the same coloring as the oil, and I keep wanting to pick that up and show you guys, because that's what I'm comparing everything to. But it also, I don't think it's as protective or as nice as the polyurethane. Again, it feels very plasticky. It doesn't look very good. I've managed to get a whole bunch of streaks and that through the finish. So again, I don't know if that was issues with application process. The Pauling soil, the sample tins don't actually give you their official application instructions, so I had to look it up on Google. Again, I followed it as best I could. I made sure to apply it. Then I lightly sanded it, absolutely cleaned off all the dust possible, applied the second coat to that nice smooth layer, and it looked fine. But now that it's actually cured up and dried, we've got some really weird, just where the oil soaked into the wood, it all just looks really bad. Now, finally, the obvious choice, in my opinion, is the tried and true varnish oil. Now, there's not much to say about this. Again, I am very biased in my opinion here because when I look at finishes, I want something that is going to be as long-lasting as possible. The idea and the purpose behind these other 4 finishes is that they put a layer of plastic over the wood to theoretically protect it from getting scratched or dented or all that stuff. And I just don't see the point in that. And so what I've found over the past few years, of all the furniture pieces that I've made and finished, the few that I've done with film finishes have actually turned out much worse than anything I've done with oil finishes. And the reason this happens is because on a film finish, you've got this surface that can be scratched. Whereas on an oil finish, what's going to get scratched is the wood. And so trying to fix a scratch on a film finish means you have to strip away the entire finish and completely refinish the surface. So if it's a tabletop, you're refinishing that entire surface. If it's a table leg, you're refinishing that entire leg to get that surface finish look the same all the way around. Whereas with an oil, if the wood gets scratched, all you're doing is just sanding that area, and you can apply a little bit of oil over it, and it doesn't look any different than anywhere else on the piece of wood. The other big thing I will say is the reason I use tried and true or just any kind of traditional oil finish on all of my projects is because I cannot stand using these other 4 finishes. Surprisingly enough, the Pauling soil, I forgot this, but it is actually a very chemically potent finish. I was really shocked when I opened the can. I thought it was much more oil-based or much more traditional, but it absolutely stinks just as bad as these other 3. And my garage here was not any better. I had to, luckily I bring my truck in here every day, I drive out my truck out of here and bring it back in every day, so I'm opening the big door behind me here twice a day. So it managed to air out the place pretty good, but there is definitely still some residual stink from here, in here from these other finishes. So whereas with tried and true, again, especially in the colder months when I can't have the garage heated up to 20 degrees Celsius constantly for the finish to cure, none of these other finishes, I can't bring them in my house because it'll stink up the place and it's actually highly toxic. Whereas tried and true, I put finish on something, if I'm doing a cutting board, I can put finish on the cutting board, bring it in, sit it in my office, and it's no issue. I can put it on a piece of furniture. I can bring that piece of furniture in, have it sitting in my living room, and, yeah, there's a little smell, but it's not anything toxic. It's just kind of, I don't know, it smells like boiled linseed oil. And again, if you're a woodworker, you're going to learn to love that scent because it just smells so good. So, I don't really know how much more to say about this. Again, I said it at the beginning of the video, I said it 2 minutes. So I don't know how much more to say about this. I said it at the beginning of the video, and I said it right at the middle of the video, and I'm saying it now. I am very biased towards traditional oil finishes, like tried and true finishes, just because they are the simplest, easiest, and generally the cheapest finish to apply. They take little to no maintenance, and you don't really have to worry about them getting damaged. So I do hope this video helps some people out. I know when I first got into woodworking, I struggled with finishes. You can see the whole line of finishes here and how long it took me to get to tried and true before I figured out what worked best. And realistically, I kind of got these 2 at the same time. So I thought that they were very similar, but I finally settled on tried and true because I found that it was just overall a much easier finish to work with. If you want more detail about these other finishes, let me know. I am going to be releasing a video here in a few days or a few weeks. I don't know quite when I'm going to get around to editing it. Going into way more detail about traditional oil finishes, some of the benefits, some of the cons to them. And yeah, so that video will be coming out soon, so make sure you subscribe if you want to see that. And as always, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.